In a busy market in central Beijing, a man who's experienced the extremes of communist China.
这葡萄多少钱一斤啊？3斤5块。3斤5块，保甜吗？保甜，你尝尝，继续尝尝，没关系。
Once he had a promising career working for the fathers of the revolution. Then he fell from favour. Through 50 years of communism, Harold Xu has been a survivor, galvanised by experience.
It depends on my own personality. Well, I have been optimistic all through the years. And that's maybe one of the basic reasons that I have survived.
At just 22, Harold worked as an interpreter for the Chinese Foreign Service, translating for Premier Zhou Enlai and the great helmsman himself, Mao Zedong.
I remember very clearly, I first saw Mao at a very close distance when I was 17 years old. I was taken there to watch the ceremony when a foreign ambassador presented his credentials. And my boss, Mr. Han Shu, he later became Chinese ambassador in Washington, said, "Look here, you are just 17 years old, and you can see Chairman Mao in such a close distance. It's a great honor." I really thought it was great. It was my great honor.
But working in the shadow of the chairman was no protection from Mao's sweeping authoritarianism. Harold spent 10 years in jail for a trifling offence. He succumbed to his weakness for foreign clothes, borrowing government funds to buy them. He would soon come to reappraise his view of Mao.
One day I came upon one booklet which had a speech by Mao. In that speech, Mao said, "The first emperor of China buried 460 Chinese scholars alive, but we have executed 460,000 counter-revolutionaries." It was so alarming to me. I said, how could so many people be executed? And how could he compare himself to the first emperor of China, Qin Shi Huang?
Harold Xu's recollections of 50 years of communism differ sharply from the images fashioned for the official celebrations this week. So too the experiences of millions more who suffered during one of Mao's most destructive campaigns, the mass dispatch of young people to China's rural heartland, the tragedy of the so-called educated youth. Far from his birthplace, Beijing, Zhang Zuotao is a man with an absurd profession. In this desperately arid corner of central China, Zhang patrols the Victory Reservoir as a flood control officer. It's a pointless job in the middle of nowhere. As one of Mao's so-called educated youth, Zhang never thought he'd be trapped in so much misery.
那阵幼小无知，年龄又小，17、18岁，又没有社会上经验，各方面都什么也没有的，大量回去就是个7、8、7、9、80，大部分都是人家个人，人家家里啊给人家子女都给弄回去，我这个当时也就没有人过问这个事。
To this day, he suffers the legacy of one of Mao's ill-conceived campaigns. Most had returned to the cities by the time Mao died, but Jiang missed his chance to leave. Now he, his wife and children are learning to live on next to nothing.
我们这就表和老姜是一家人噻，我连一点面都买不起，我就生活费都没有一点，就光是靠我种玉米、种地，还要买自种，话费都没钱。 我就跑了办我们这个事儿，就我们2个生活费没有，工资没有。我要是从查证那里面到现在，路费都没有。
In this harsh environment, their cave home provides them with shelter, but their daily sustenance consists of noodles rolled from cheap flour. Their living expenses are donated by relatives. The local government owes them 10 years of back pay. All the family's possessions are held in this trunk, the only reminder of Mr. Jiang's sorry past. He rummages for photographs that document his family's sad life. Here, there won't be celebrations for China's 50th anniversary. But it's hard to comprehend how, after a life wasted in the countryside, he refuses to blame Chairman Mao.
我谁也不怪，现在社会主义国家，我谁也不怪，只有怪我个人无能，没有本事，无能。这个主席的话，我对主席的话还是抱有很高的威望。伟大舵手嘛，英明领袖。
It was a campaign known as the Great Proletarian Cultural Revolution. Mao started it to destroy his enemies, calling on revolutionary firebrands to destroy anything traditional. The entire education system stood still while battalions of Red Guards plundered and desecrated, humiliating, beating and often murdering those deemed by Mao to be bad elements.
We have a saying, 地富反坏右. Di is landlord, Fu is rich peasant, Fan is counter-revolutionary, Huai, bad elements, and Yu, rightists. So these families were considered as bad families. So
Professor Harold Shu's bourgeois tastes, which he retains to this day, put him in the firing line of his former communist masters. Now a visiting professor at an American university, he recalls how his bad family background added to his list of crimes.
my father was a capitalist before 1949. He invested in stocks, and he made a fortune. He bought a house, 4-story house, and he owned a Studebaker before 1949.
A Studebaker?
Yeah, Studebaker. It's now a collection item. So, for instance, such a, say, family would be classified as undesirable.
By 1969, the country was in a state of mayhem, and Mao needed to rein in the destruction he'd unleashed. To solve the problem and strike against those with bad backgrounds, he sent 17 million teenagers aged between 15 and 17 to the depths of the countryside for a hard education, a lesson in life from the poorest of the poor. Years on from their ordeal as educated youth from Shanghai, Terry Sun and her friends are marking China's anniversary with a journey of their own. For Terry, it's just a year since she called back on the village of her peasant education. For her old friends, Lao Ma and Li Wei, it's the first time back in 27 years. Their experiences have made them uneasy about the trip.
It was uncertain. At the time we left for countryside, there's no guarantee you will be able to come back to Shanghai. We were told you will spend your whole life in countryside.
30 years ago, they worked the soil for an agricultural commune, producing corn and sorghum for the state. Then their host villagers barely had enough to feed themselves. Now the peasants own land and have built comfortable houses. The greetings are warm and friendly, in marked contrast to the confusion and misery of the first arrival. People appear from everywhere, greeting the former students like long-lost members of the family. A feast is prepared for us. Fresh vegetables, meat, even fish is on the menu. There's new prosperity here. They toast the reunion and the progress since capitalism came to the commune.
就是只要是当时那种情况，就是能吃饱填饱肚子就行了。就是大米很少见，就国家干部也是每月几斤。现在农民吃大米不是家常的，要吃大饼了嘛，就像吃细粮食。原来。
现在你们都是满意吗？
高兴，满意。
生活好还不高兴？
生活提高。这不是一个人，2个人，就是说基本上90%左右的都是。
While the villagers have prospered, this educated youth doesn't live as well as the peasants. Lao Ma's only graduation was from the fields. To a dull job in a tractor factory, he's held down for 30 years.
我自己的生活也改变了。这个比较呢，怎么比呢？从这个菜来看啊，我家平时还吃得上。
是吗？然后呢，你们每个 Terry Sun spent 4 years labouring in the fields, a reluctant conscript to Mao Zedong's program, which robbed so many of an education and the best years of their lives.
I could never ever forgive what he did to the country and to the whole generation. Basically, he sacrificed the whole generation for his personal political ambition. I mean, I am one of the that time that was young generation. I'm one of those people, and I strongly believe we were sacrificed.
遗憾比较失望的就是我们这一代的学问太低，都赶在我们最年轻、最好的，应该是充实自己学习知识的时候，没能够学习，没能够更好的进行深造，这我挺遗憾。 所以说，我把希望寄托在我下一代身上，能够让他们进行更好的生长。
都有喜呀，好了，没有问题啊，有人来了，下次再见，再见，有现在来。
Unlike Lao Ma and many of China's educated youth, Terry Sun has overcome her experience and excelled. After returning from the countryside, she was assigned a lowly factory job assembling toys for a few cents a day. Now the financial controller for a multinational automotive company earns a 6-figure salary. To reach these heights, she first fled the country. She found education and opportunity in Australia, built a career and learned to assess China from an objective distance.
I think China's biggest problem is corruption. But if they can have a good system to overcome the corruption, I do believe China has got a good future, really. It does have a lot of problems because too many people, corruption, but we need to have a very strong government to overcome all these difficulties.
Terry now sees her future introducing Western-style management to China, and by doing so, helping the country shake off Mao's legacy. The less fortunate, like Jiang Zuotao, are trapped in a wasteland, unable to leave and seek a second chance. When the Cultural Revolution ended and Jiang married, he unwittingly forfeited his right to return home to Beijing. Mao Zedong's system of residence registration, which still applies in China today, prevents peasants from moving into the cities. On the shores of the Victory Reservoir, Mr. Jiang waits for the day officials review his case, at least permitting his children to go to Beijing, the city where he was born and where he hopes to die. Yet another silent victim of China's modern emperor.
Chinese need an emperor. And in Chinese tradition, there has been lack of tolerated dissent or open debate. So if the emperor proved to be a monster, then the cause of his followers, the only cause of his followers, was to obey and endure, because in a way he was their creation.